Tell me if this sounds familiar. Some movie buff friend of yours told you, hey, you need to check out this cool movie from a few years ago. It's super weird and creative. So you gave it a shot. But when they said it was super weird, they weren't kidding. Right from the start, there are so many confusing details and plot threads that don't really get explained. And as you go on, things only get more and more confusing, with questions piling up in your mind, until you get to the end and you're like, help, I need someone to explain this to me. Fortunately, that's why I'm here. Donnie Darko is an example of what I like to call a mystery box story. Definition on screen. And I've dedicated myself to explaining as many of them as possible. If you have questions about the convoluted lore of a story you just finished, then I'm the guy who can give you the answers you need. Then afterwards, I give each mystery box story a rating out of 10, using my criteria for what makes a mystery like this fun and engaging. In this video, I'm going to attempt to give a comprehensive explanation of every confusing aspect of this story. So, let's... Words cannot describe how much I hate that thing. Let's explain Donnie Darko. Donnie Darko is a 2001 movie by debut director Richard Kelly. It was also the movie that launched Jake Gyllenhaal's career. If they haven't seen it, the thing most people know it for is the big human rabbit demon creature that's on the cover. This is one of those stories that split down the middle between the fantastical and the mundane. One half of the story shows us a conservative suburban town in the 1980s, a place where a misfit teenager like Donnie struggles to fit in. The other half dives deep into a complex and psychedelic sci-fi that both creates a deep, rich lore and literalizes Donnie's disturbed psyche. A lot of this movie is up for interpretation, so I won't pretend I can definitively answer every single little thing. But there are broad plot points that do have explanations, even if they tend to go over the heads of the average moviegoer. Let's see if I can catch you up on anything you missed on your first viewing, or second viewing, or third. Before I summarize the plot, I should say that I'll be talking about the director's cut here, not the theatrical version. If you want any hope of understanding this movie at all, you need the director's cut. Those extra scenes explain so much. Okay, the movie opens to show us our lead character, Donnie Darko. We meet his parents and his sisters. We also learn that he has mental health problems. He takes medication and sees a therapist. One night, Donnie sleepwalks outside, where he meets this unholy abomination named Frank, who tells him that the world will end in 28 days. That same night, a jet engine falls out of the sky and lands on Donnie's room. If Donnie hadn't been sleepwalking, it would have killed him. Weirdly, there was no record of any plane passing over the area at the time. At school and around the neighborhood, we get to know the town Donnie lives in. It's a very conservative religious place that emphasizes conformity. There's a new student in Donnie's English class, Gretchen, and the two of them hit it off. Frank contacts Donnie again, and he commands Donnie to go break the school's water main with an axe. Donnie also writes, "They made me do it on the ground." This whole event bears some similarity to a story read in the school English class. So Bible-thumping teacher Mrs. Farmer leads a charge to ban it and make the school curriculum more moral. Frank contacts Donnie again and mentions something about time travel.
Do you believe in time travel?
There's this weird old lady who lives down the street, Roberta Sparrow. Donnie finds out that she wrote a book called The Philosophy of Time Travel. This is the biggest change the director's cut makes. It shows us pages from this book that explain a lot. Once I'm done with this summary, I'll read all those pages. After Donnie reads this book, there's a moment where he sees these watery trails in front of everyone that seem to show their future, their fate. Donnie follows his own, and it leads him to a gun. In another vision with Frank takes off his bunny outfit, thank Apollo, to reveal that he's just a guy, with his eye gouged out. He shows Donnie a vision of a time portal, and he tells Donnie to burn down the house of Jim Cunningham, a motivational speaker from school. The next morning, police find
Oh, please, don't use those words!
in the ashes. Donnie's mother and younger sister Samantha take a flight to Samantha's dance competition. Donnie and his older sister Elizabeth throw a party while she's away, on Halloween. But this is the night that Frank said the world would end. Donnie and his friends go to Roberta Sparrow's house, but they run into a couple of school bullies who are trying to rob her. They attack Donnie, but they're interrupted when a car runs Gretchen over. The driver of the car is Frank, who's just a guy in a Halloween costume. Donnie shoots Frank in the eye. Then he carries Gretchen's body back home. He says that everything's gonna be okay. A big cloud forms over Donnie's house. The plane with Donnie's mother and sister flies over it, but something goes wrong and one of the engines falls off and gets sucked through this vortex. We transport back to the beginning of the movie, the night the jet engine fell. But this time, Donnie is in his room instead of sleepwalking outside. He laughs, and the jet engine crushes him. The final shots of the movie show people waking up the next morning feeling various emotions and not knowing why. Gretchen watches Donnie's body get taken away. She says she never knew Donnie, but she seems to have a subconscious connection to him. Now I'll read those book pages. Chapter 1. The Tangent Universe. Incidents when the fabric of the fourth dimension becomes corrupted are incredibly rare. If a tangent universe occurs, it will be highly unstable, sustaining life for no longer than several weeks. Eventually, it will collapse in upon itself, forming a black hole within the primary universe capable of destroying all existence. Chapter 2. Water and Metal. Water and metal are the key elements of time travel. Water is the barrier element for the construction of time portals, used as gateways between the universes at the tangent vortex. When a tangent universe occurs, those living nearest to the vortex will find themselves at the epicenter of a dangerous new world. Artifacts provide the first sign that a tangent universe has occurred. If an artifact occurs, the living will retrieve it with great interest and curiosity. Artifacts are formed from metal, such as an arrowhead from an ancient Mayan civilization, or a metal sword from medieval Europe. Chapter 6. The Living Receiver. The Living Receiver is chosen to guide the artifact into position for its journey back to the primary universe. No one knows how or why a receiver will be chosen. The Living Receiver is often blessed with fourth-dimensional powers. Those include increased strength, telekinesis, mind control, and the ability to conjure fire and water. The Living Receiver is often tormented by terrifying dreams, visions, and auditory hallucinations during his time within the Tangent Universe. Chapter 7. The Manipulated Living. The manipulated living will do anything to save themselves from oblivion. Chapter 9. The Insurance Trap. The manipulated dead will set an insurance trap. The Living Receiver must ensure the fate of all mankind. Chapter 10. The Manipulated Dead. Chapter 12. Dreams. When the manipulated awaken from their journey into the Tangent Universe, they are often haunted by the experience in their dreams. Many of them will not remember. Those who do remember the journey are often overcome with profound remorse for their regretful actions. Like most people, I didn't know what to make of all this the first time I saw this movie. I did a lot of digging to find any other information that might help me make sense of it all. First things first, there are some supplemental materials we need to go through. First is the Donnie Darko book. This wasn't the tell-all lore explainer book that I hoped it would be when I bought it. It has an interview with Richard Kelly, the original script for the movie, and some production images. The one useful thing it has is extended versions of those philosophy of time travel pages. There's not much here that isn't already covered by what we got in the director's cut, but we do get the full chapter 10 page, which was completely cut off in the movie. The Manipulated Dead. The Manipulated Dead are more powerful than the Living Receiver. If a person dies within the tangent dimension, they are able to contact the Living Receiver through the fourth dimensional construct. The fourth dimensional construct is made of water. The Manipulated Dead will manipulate the Living Receiver using the fourth dimensional construct. The Manipulated Dead will often set an insurance trap for the Living Receiver to ensure that the artifact is returned safely to the primary universe. If the insurance trap is successful, the Living Receiver will have no choice but to use his fourth dimensional power to send the artifact back in time to the primary universe before the black hole collapses upon itself. By the way, the book opens with a foreword by Jake Gyllenhaal, where the first line is, "What is Donnie Darko about? I have no idea." Which, fair. There's also the official Donnie Darko website. You can't access it anymore, but there are still archives of what was on it. It's a weird artifact of early 2000s internet. There are too many little things here to list out, but some highlights include those same philosophy of time travel pages, a police report detailing Donnie's arrest for arson and sleepwalking escape from jail, a government log discussing two identical jet engines, and obituaries for Roberta Sparrow, Jim Cunningham, and Donnie's science teacher. Okay, let's start breaking this stuff down. The philosophy of time travel implies that this kind of event has happened many times before, and it gives a ton of different terms and descriptions of aspects of this event. We need to go through all these terms, define them, and point out where they appear in the events of the movie. First, primary universe, and tangent universe. The book says that sometimes time becomes unstable and branches off into separate timelines. Most of the movie takes place in one of these tangent universes. The tangent universe needs to be destroyed, or else it'll collapse all of reality. Next, artifact. An artifact is something that's been duplicated in the tangent universe, so there's an extra one of them. The universe can't handle having two of the same object. In order to stop reality from collapsing, the artifact needs to be sent out of the tangent universe into the primary universe. The artifact is always made of metal. In this case, the artifact is the jet engine. The living receiver is the person whose job it is to send the artifact back. That's Donnie. The living receiver is also granted all kinds of special powers to help them complete this task, which explains all the impossible things Donnie is able to do.
That's solid bronze, isn't it? Yep.
How did this happen?
Then, manipulated living and manipulated dead. Both of these are meant to guide the living receiver towards sending the artifact back. Manipulated dead are people who die in the tangent universe. That's Frank and Gretchen. Manipulated dead are able to travel back in time to guide Donnie where he needs to go. Basically, every other character in the movie is a manipulated living. They have the same job, to guide Donnie, but they don't have the same level of knowledge, just the vague impression that they need to do something and go somewhere. Finally, insurance trap. This is a plan enacted by the manipulated dead, Frank, to force Donnie to send the jet engine to the primary universe. Since they know the future, they can influence things to lead everything down the right path to prevent reality from collapsing. I know that's a lot I just threw at you, so let's go through the movie in chronological order to explain how all this lore fits in. When the movie opens, we're in the primary universe. Then that night, a tangent universe is created. It's not explained why, it just does. Time splits. The primary universe is put on pause, while the tangent universe continues. The tangent universe will only last for 28 days before it implodes and destroys everything. The tangent universe is exactly the same as the primary universe, except for one thing. The jet engine got duplicated. Jet engine 1 is still attached to the jet somewhere. Jet engine 2 can't occupy the same exact physical space as jet engine 1, so it teleports to the epicenter of the tangent universe, Donnie's house. Now it's a race against the clock. The world has 28 days for the living receiver, Donnie, to make a time portal called the Vortex and send the artifact, the jet engine, through it. But Donnie doesn't know any of this. He's just a kid. Luckily, he has help. Frank. If you look forward to the end of the movie, Frank dies, making him a manipulated dead. That means it's Frank's job to reach back into the past and direct Donnie towards this goal. Plus, there's the added bonus that everyone in town is a manipulated living, and they have vague inclinations to go where Frank needs them to go, even if they're not consciously aware of it. Gretchen is also a manipulated dead, but she doesn't appear to Donnie in the same way that Frank does. You can imagine that if Gretchen did that, it'd be more confusing for Donnie than anything. So, Frank goes about doing the whole Doctor Strange from Infinity War butterfly effect thing to make sure that everything happens the way it's supposed to. There are 4 main moments where he intervenes. First, he lures Donnie out of his room so that he doesn't get crushed by the engine. That one's pretty simple. Donnie needs to survive, duh. Second, he tells Donnie to flood the school. This does a couple of things. It closes the school, which leads to Donnie and Gretchen walking home together and start dating, so that when Gretchen dies later, Donnie is so enraged that he shoots Frank. If Frank doesn't die, then he can't become a manipulated dead. So Frank needs to cause his own death. Also, water is used to create time vortexes. Donnie uses the water from the pipes to make the portal that will later send the engine back to the primary universe. Third, in the movie theater, Frank mentions time travel to Donnie, which leads Donnie to ask his science teacher for Roberto Sparrow's book. After reading it, Donnie understands his purpose. And fourth, Frank tells Donnie to burn down Jim Cunningham's house, which leads to Jim getting arrested, which leads Mrs. Farmer to back out of chaperoning the dance to attend his hearing, which leads Donnie's mom to take her place, which leaves Donnie and Elizabeth home to throw the Halloween party that culminates in Frank's death. By the end of the movie, Frank is successful. He got Donnie to kill him. Donnie also now knows that he's supposed to send the engine back. And, if Donnie had been having any second thoughts, he's now wanted for murdering Frank, so chickening out isn't an option. Donnie uses telekinesis to rip the engine off the plane his mother and sister are on, which goes through the time vortex and into the primary universe. This erases the tangent universe and all the events of the movie so far. We pick back up in the primary universe. But we go to that moment when Donnie is in his room. and Donnie had just sent the jet engine into this universe where it materializes above Donnie's room. So it falls and kills Donnie. The movie ends with all the primary universe versions of these people with vague memories of what happened in the Tangent universe. Did you follow all that? I don't blame you if you couldn't. It's a lot to take in. I wish there was a more concise way to explain it all, but this was the best I could do. Those are the big broad points. Now let's go over some of the smaller questions you might still have. First, what's up with Roberta Sparrow? How did she know about all this stuff?
The storm is coming. You must hurry.
Well, we don't get any explicit explanations about this, but the only explanation that makes sense is that she was once a living receiver back in the day, and all the stuff she wrote in her book was autobiographical. By the way, Roberta Sparrow was also a manipulated living during the events of the movie. Because she'd been through all this before, she was able to take more specific actions to manipulate Donnie. That's why she was always checking her mailbox. Her being out in the street like that all the time directly led to Donnie shooting Frank in a bunch of different ways. Then what about Donnie's mental health problems? Were they caused by the time travel stuff, or did he always have them? This one's easy. He definitely always had them. The Tangent universe wasn't created until the beginning of the movie, and Donnie's issues started way before that. A while back, he got in trouble for burning someone's house down and then sleepwalking out of jail.
Yeah, I was in jail once. I mean, I accidentally burned down this house. I mean, it was abandoned, but still,
I'd also like to go over the whole water thing again. Philosophy of time travel says that the fourth dimensional construct is made of water. Water is used as a gateway through time. Donnie uses the water from the flooded school to make the vortex between universes. Donnie can see people's fates, which manifest as spears of water coming out of them. We can also assume from what we've read that Frank uses a water portal to travel back in time and contact Donnie. That's mostly extrapolation though, since we don't really see that. But we do get that scene where Frank contacts Donnie through the mirror, and when Donnie stabs it, it ripples. Like water. Get off the screen! Is this movie why I hate rabbits so much? No, it had to be before that. When you're focused just on the what questions, of what happened in the movie, you can find answers if you look hard enough. But when you start getting into the why questions, things get tricky. Answers are more philosophical than concrete. Like, why was Donnie chosen to be the living receiver? We don't know for sure, and Philosophy of Time Travel even says no one knows how they're chosen. But let's extrapolate. I think it's reasonable to say that Donnie was chosen as the living receiver because he was at the epicenter of the Tangent universe. Okay, then why was that the epicenter? On that note, why was the Tangent universe created at all? Why here and now? The cause of the Tangent universe isn't explained, but it's also very pointedly not explained, if that makes sense. See, Donnie is caught between science and religion throughout the movie. He knows that there's some force out there controlling his life and the world in ways that he can't explain.
And the mere fact that this choice exists would make all preformed destiny come to an end.
Not if you travel within God's channel.
But through the themes of the movie, we're shown that this higher power is unknowable. We can't know whether it was God causing all of this, or some unthinking, unfeeling force of the universe, or some other option we can't even conceive of. During some of the trippier parts of the movie, there are some POV shots through what looks like a computer screen. Like someone or something is watching all this from a computer and controlling it all. That's both a very godlike image and a very sciencey image. I interpret this as a non-literal way to show us that we can't know who or what is pulling the strings. This is one possible view of what it could look like, but the cause of all this is beyond what any of us could ever imagine.
You're an agnostic. An agnostic is someone who believes that there can be no proof of the existence of God, but does not deny a possibility that God exists.
This is what I love about mystery box stories. You keep asking why, going up a chain of questions until you get to, is God real? Finally, did Donnie have to die? So like, Donnie teleported under the jet engine and it killed him. Was his death necessary? Well, it depends on how you frame the question. Yes, Donnie was doomed to die because of these specific circumstances. His options were to do nothing and let reality collapse, or send the jet engine through, which then kills him. He knew this, but he wasn't afraid to die. But more broadly, in order to complete the ritual and end the Tangent universe, is the living receiver required to die? Looking at it logically, no. We could say that it was just bad luck that Donnie died. Like, all else being equal, if the artifact was something smaller, it wouldn't have crushed him. But also, the movie talks a lot about the concept of fate, that certain things are just inevitable. Looking at the facts, you could assume Donnie's death was a fluke. But check out this passage from Philosophy of Time Travel. Ancient myth tells us of the Mayan warrior killed by an arrowhead that had fallen from a cliff, where there was no army, no enemy to be found. We are told of the medieval knight mysteriously impaled by a sword he had not yet built. We are told that these things occur for a reason. These are stories of living receivers being killed by artifacts, so this isn't the first time it's happened. Why? I don't know. It's fate that they die. It happens for a reason, but we're not privy to what that reason is. And I hope all this makes sense. All of this is so dense that it's hard to break it down in a way that sounds clear and concise. That's why I'm trying my best to repeat myself and rephrase things as many times as possible. But I think it takes a lot more than one person explaining it one time for you to understand it. So I'm going to put a link in the description to a fan website that I think also gives a pretty good comprehensive explanation. As someone who had to teach themselves all this stuff, it helps to go over it all multiple times through multiple sources. So when you're done with this video, go read that website, then read it again, and then maybe watch my video again. If you're determined enough, it'll start to sink in. One more thing. If I really want this video to cover everything, I also have to talk about the sequel, S. Darko. I would not consider S. Darko to be canon. Richard Kelly wasn't involved in it at all, and he's completely disavowed it. Considering he invented all this mythos, I wouldn't trust a movie that he didn't make to help explain it. Also, it's bad. It's mind-numbingly slow and boring. It's all the aesthetic and vibes of Donnie Darko with none of what made it engaging. The gist of the movie is that Donnie's sister, Samantha Darko, all grown up, is a manipulated dead. She dies later in the movie, and she goes back in time to guide a living receiver named Justin, Roberta Sparrow's grandson. The artifact is a meteorite, which kills Justin at the end. That's all I feel like getting into, because again, this movie is dumb and boring, and I don't like it. Now that I've explained this movie to the best of my ability, it's time to talk about something else. Whether this movie is actually good. Does this ambiguity and confusion make the viewing experience better? First, does it open with one big mystery to grab our attention? Yeah, that early scene where we first meet Frank is confusing and terrifying, and it might be the most memorable part of the movie. Is there more than one mystery? I don't know. Not really. Sure, when you start digging, questions pile up, as you can see by the length of this video. But while you're watching, the only major thing you're wondering about is, what's this freaky rabbit thing, and what does he want Donnie to do? At least all of the lore is cohesive and connected. There aren't random little details that don't fit into the larger whole. Although, small nitpick, it's annoying that Gretchen doesn't do anything as a manipulated dead. I wish she had appeared in some capacity, because as it stands, it's easy to start questioning whether you misunderstood how manipulated dead work, since the rules only apply to one out of the two that you see. And all these questions are definitely things that the audience is supposed to wonder about. Donnie even asked a few of these questions, serving as an audience surrogate.
Could these portals just appear anywhere, anytime?
Since Donnie Darko is just one movie, it clocks in at way shorter than the average mystery box story I cover here. That's a huge contributing factor to why the story is so confusing, I think. There's all this complicated lore, but not a lot of time to fit it all in. For the theatrical cut, most of it was left out. The story is ambiguous by necessity, because it doesn't have time to explain everything. I wouldn't say that the story paces reveals very well, or at all. There are virtually no moments where the movie throws you a bone and answers a question you have. You spend the whole time wondering what's going on. Even when it gives you those book passages that explain some of the lore, none of it makes sense in the moment. The only way to get anything resembling answers is to get to the end and then study up on everything it gave you. I do like the pacing of the story itself, though. The script does a great job of switching between the mundane small-town story and the heady, mind-bending supernatural stuff. Even though most of the movie is pretty slow, I'm never bored. The mysteries of Donnie Darko are not obviously diegetic. Whenever I get to this section in any of my videos, I worry that people don't get what I mean by this. But Donnie Darko is a great example of why it's so important. Sure, the supernatural elements are part of the world of the story. Digging into the lore makes it clear that these things are definitely really happening. But an average first-time viewer might see these things and come to the conclusion that these things are all in Donnie's imagination, or that all of this is meant to be an elaborate visual metaphor for his mental state or something. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it completely changes the viewing experience. It's engaging a different part of your brain, looking at symbolic meaning and literary analysis versus decoding the plot like a puzzle. Everything is definitely not wrapped up by the end. Most people finish this movie understanding absolutely nothing. You could argue that it's possible to explain all of it with enough determination, like what I did in this video. But to have a satisfying ending, a mystery box story has to meet me halfway. Give me something to stop my head from spinning before the credits roll. Everything was definitely planned out in advance though. All this lore on the website and the director's cut didn't get released until years later. And there's no way it would be so consistent if it wasn't part of the plan from the beginning. Finally, does the mystery connect back to the characters? Well, it's connected to Donnie. He's as curious as we are, and we watch him get his questions answered and accept his destiny. He cares deeply about it all, and it's the driving force behind his character arc. This movie is lighter than usual on mystery box tropes. It's got time travel, and it's got Roberta Sparrow as the person who knows everything but doesn't explain it. Not much else though. Donnie Darko is one of the most unique movies I've ever seen. It's rare to see a story like this that's so ambiguous and dense. Most people tend to like movies that spoon-feed you. The common opinion among the fandom is that the confusion you feel is all part of the experience, and that maybe you shouldn't go digging around for answers. But my brain doesn't work like that, and I bet yours doesn't either. So I'm glad that there are answers out there, even if it takes a lot of patience to find them. Donnie Darko gets a final mystery box rating of 5 out of 10.
Sometimes I doubt your commitment to sparkle motion.